Welcome back to the Metal and Miniatures podcast, where we take a jack of all trades, master of none approach to podcasting topics.
I'm Josh.
And I'm John. Why do you have to say that with such a sultry voice?
Because it's the first thing they hear of me, so it's got to be good.
Today, tonight, whatever the hell, whenever you're listening to this, our podcasting topic, is UFOs.
And more.
And more. Right.
Etc.
Etc. Boys and girls, I'm going to give you a short history lesson on UFOs. So you can skip past this.
Good, then I'll know how to continue with the rest of the podcast.
Okay. All right, so funny thing, UFO sightings have only been like a really big thing since like the late 40s, early 50s. Sure, like early history, we have recorded instances of people seeing things that they couldn't particularly explain. But most of those were interpreted as religious symbols and events. And so I don't know if those get like a free pass or so on like the UFO scene. But something interesting is in ancient Chinese records, I think, somewhere between 200, 500 BC.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, I'm sure you know. They recorded Halley's Comet. Like, they recorded seeing Halley's Comet. I mean, that's kind of impressive, right? And again, they might not have known. I mean, I don't really know how. I know the Chinese were extremely technologically advanced and astronomically advanced, but I don't know if they actually knew it was the Halley's Comet or a comet. But, you know, before the late 40s and early 50s, not a whole lot that we have to go along with. Up until, you know, the late 40s, early 50s, it could have just been anything. But since then, there's been people that have talked about seeing a lot of different flying things.
Yeah, I think they would be having them been able to put a name to it, whatever it is.
Well, yeah, I mean, World War II had just happened, and
Yeah.
so, and then you have all the German experiments, the aerospace experiments and stuff. So you have like you have rockets, and then you have our space exploration kind of starting up in the world, not just here in the States. And so maybe we were just more interested in like the atmosphere and what was beyond, I guess.
Yeah, and maybe it just also wasn't so. They weren't able to spread it as much as far as like what they thought they were seeing, or maybe they just didn't want to spread it as much. I don't know.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a couple of different famous sightings, right? So you have the Roswell UFO incident, and we're not going to go over, you know, a lot of this stuff. Cause
You can Google it.
Yeah, you can just do whatever you want to do. You have the Roswell UFO incident. That was in 1947. You have the Mantell UFO incident, which, you know, it's really interesting because it resulted in a crash of the pilot who was pursuing this UFO. You also have, again, in 1947, the summer of 1947, you had a guy actually use the phrase flying saucer, and that was a civilian pilot. He saw a bunch of flying objects near Mount Rainier, and the pilot was Kenneth Arnold. Anyway, that's another kind of famous one, and that's one where he measured, I guess, how fast they were going, how fast these objects were flying. Anyway, so you have all these crazy different sightings, but a lot of them, like we said, were in the late 40s and then the early 50s.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I don't know if it was just different pop culture. I guess it wouldn't start that early, but different stuff in pop culture that would have kind of pushed it along. I don't know.
Maybe it was just culture.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
I don't know about pop culture, but...
Yeah, I guess just culture in general at that point. I mean, I know as time went on, it was pop culture. It helped immensely the case of the people who believe in that stuff. But there's an interesting site that basically has to do with all of the sightings, like UFO sightings. So it's called UFO Sightings Daily.
.com.
So it's really official. And I just was Googling this just to see firsthand all these people that are really into it, and they kind of feed each other as far as what they've seen. But it's interesting. It has the government files section, famous people, because if famous people see a UFO, then
that's serious.
Shit. Yeah, then it's serious business. U.S. presidents, maybe even more serious business.
Wow.
Yeah, and then like pilot sightings, like we talked about. So there was a few of those in there. A lot of them go into the stories, but one of them was interesting to get a little bit current. It's like UFO with an alien head sticking out on Google Earth map. But the interesting thing about these,
it's like a cartoon caricature.
Well,
on Google Maps.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of these on this site, and this is in general, that one's just really funny because it's just like an alien head, but they're really just kind of images, almost like when you see a cloud and you're like, that could be like a bow tie cloud.
Yeah.
And it's basically these. It's just, oh look, I saw this UFO, and it's just kind of like a shape that it could have been a shadow of something. And this site, it just goes on and on, like
I
every
mean, let's
day
be
there's
fair.
something
That's
else.
basically every UFO sighting, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, that's what I mean. And then they'll like, there's YouTube videos on here like I saw a UFO, and it's just a flash of light in the sky. I don't know.
Cool.
But they're serious about it.
So UFOsightings.com.
Yeah, UFO sightings daily.
Sorry, UFOsightsdaily.com.
Yeah, because there's
One every day.
well multiple every day. Yeah, so serious.
This is serious stuff.
Yeah.
I kind of have a problem with UFOs, or I guess I should say the stories about UFO sightings.
Yeah.
Because there's no continuity,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
I mean, you have, and this is since the 40s, right? We have people that have claimed to see flying saucers or dish-like
Mhm.
flying objects, flying triangles, flying cigars, or like cigar shapes or whatever, flying chevrons, flying crescents, boomerangs, eggs, pyramids, domes, I mean, you have every fucking shape that people have seen flying in the air, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's just me being a huge skeptic. I just don't see this being. I don't put a whole lot of weight into anecdotal experience of
Yeah.
sightings. And well, who knows? And maybe we just have so many aeronautical experiments going on that we have to have governmental UFOs that are shaped like cigars and chevrons and triangles and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
I
Maybe
guess that's why they're experimenting.
I just found my answer.
There you go.
What's interesting though is that the term UFO, that was only really officially created or accepted in '53. Before that, they were just commonly known as flying saucers, and I think that, or flying discs or something like that.
Mm.
And I think that's incredibly interesting because it seems like the culture has a lot of play on what the people were actually seeing and or claiming to see.
Yeah, I
Right.
think that too, and then you also have maybe skeptics that could say, well, it's just an unidentified flying object, instead of a flying saucer.
Well, I think like the terminology UFO was actually something that the U.S. Air Force actually started using, to kind of
Which makes sense.
to
yeah.
do the investigations and
Yeah,
the
right.
studies and all this stuff, because they didn't want to call them flying saucers or flying discs. But I'm saying that even people who gave their who would tell their experiences before '53, a lot of it was flying discs, flying saucers.
But when you got triangles,
But then and then after the fact, then it's like, oh, someone's making up the story that I saw something way cooler than a flying disc. It was a flying chevron.
and that's why. So yeah, if you have a general name, then everybody
There you
can
go.
see one.
There you go.
Yeah. See, I mean, and I'm gonna go into something else too, and just to be clear here, I believe they believe they're seeing things.
Okay.
So, but this other one I thought was pretty interesting. Was it's a site, UFOstalker.com, and it goes through like statistics of sightings. Because I think part of the way that people will help their case is like, well, there's a lot of sightings, so it's got to be true. Somehow helps their case. I don't know how.
If everyone believes it, then it's definitely
Right.
true.
Yeah. Yeah. So this one here, it kind of goes off of different. It just goes over the United States.
Okay.
Global sighting trends is 54,000 sightings currently indexed, but it also goes into most active cities, which surprisingly are New York and California.
California's not a city. That's the problem with that website right there.
Let me be clear here.
Okay, sorry.
Most active cities, New York City. Most active regions of all time are California and Texas.
Understood. I was about to call major
Oh,
bullshit on
man.
that site.
Well, then I looked down too. I was like, oh my god, they really did that. But no, I was reading the wrong column. Last 30 days, New York City had 8 sightings. Las Vegas had 7 sightings. And then there's like a nice little map of the United States that has warm and cold areas. So the warm areas on here are in orange, and those are the active areas.
Oh,
Those are
okay.
where the UFOs like to fly over.
Sure.
and then it has little graphs, and it's really cute.
Well, I'm surprised that like New Mexico isn't really high up on the list.
Mm-mm.
Because
No.
it seems like back in the day, a lot of the UFO sightings were rural areas, but now it's like New York City.
That's
How in
interesting.
the hell are you gonna see a UFO with all the lights in New York City? You can't even see the stars. I'm calling bullshit right there. If I were a UFO, I'd be flying over New York City because the chances of them not seeing you fly around at night would be higher.
Yeah. So, well, that's probably what they do.
Okay.
Anyways, that's another interesting site.
All right. So help us out, Josh. What are UFOs really? What have we been able to determine? What these sightings have been in the past. If they're not really unidentifiable, if we are able to identify them, what have they been?
They're aliens.
I just died a little inside.
No, for real though, you got a lot of weather balloons because there's a lot of just odd shapes that are flying around. Lightning, like there's a thing where it's like a ball of lightning, where it's almost like a bigger flash of light, which kind of gets mistook for a UFO. Clouds,
Mhm.
like with different lighting and stuff, can make it look like a UFO. Stars, that's why I was laughing when you said like New York, because you can't really see them, but when you do, maybe they think it's a UFO. Just different lighting, reflections, and the one I was thinking a lot of it, military aircraft. People just getting confused, when it's actually just a military aircraft, which could be
Yeah.
an unidentified flying object, but not an alien, I don't think.
I guess we could also say it could just be a psychedelic phenomenon,
Yeah,
right? People could literally just be
could be drugs.
seeing things,
Yeah,
right? So, not everyone, obviously, but I'm sure there might be one out there
one or two.
that was tripping on acid while seeing a UFO. Okay, well, you've already touched a little bit on this, and I think it's important to make the distinction between aliens and UFOs. Because a UFO, right, doesn't necessarily have to be an alien aircraft, right? A UFO could be a governmental aerospace engineered project or something
Yeah,
like that.
could be anything. It's unidentified. It's just a flying object, so it would be anything.
Right, right. And so for the people who do believe in these UFO sightings and stuff, not all of them believe that they're extraterrestrial life flying these crafts,
Yeah.
right? Some of them are just governmental conspiracists. But the distinction is, a UFO is obviously what we just said. It could be a government craft, it could be an alien craft. It doesn't matter. It could just be either or. But if we want to be specific about an alien craft, I'm pretty sure the correct term or letters, whatever the hell it's called,
It's called something. I
Yeah.
just don't know what.
is an ETA. It's extraterrestrial aircraft. I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about aliens and how people have connected UFO sightings or evidences of extraterrestrial life. Let's talk
Okay.
about that a little bit.
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
crop circles, for instance, right? Like,
Yeah. It's just an interesting thing because if there was an alien that was trying to give us a sign or something like that, like I don't know why they would go to a crop area.
cornfield.
No, a crop area, and bend the crop into like different shapes and try to communicate with us. And then people say that, well, there's no way a human could do it. That's why it's real, because it's fancy. So I don't think a human could do it.
Despite the fact that there's been multiple, groups of people
Yeah.
who have confessed doing these crop circles.
Yeah, and even on that site, UFO Sightings Daily, they talk about crop circles too, and like this new crop circle popped up, and I mean, even if aliens were really coming down to do them, like if they saw humans were also trying to do them and whatever, they'd probably stop, I think.
They'd say that, well, that's hurting the validity of
Right.
our existence.
Yeah, so regardless, yeah, so I don't know, I just think it's kind of ridiculous, but there's a lot of information about different types of crop circles and different meanings, and cases have substantially increased from the 70s to now.
I bet.
Yeah, so people were getting more artistic, I guess.
Like, that's good. I mean, we haven't talked about this a whole lot, but that's because, it has become more pop culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
Before it was kind of a crazy thing, and now it's kind of just a I don't know, maybe it's still kind of a crazy thing, but it's more acceptable to believe in this kind of stuff.
Well, like even when Signs came out, you know, the
Oh
movie
yeah.
Signs, like that had a lot to do with crop circles and stuff. And now after seeing that, you're like, oh, that was creepy. Well, of course, then people are like, yeah, like I've seen more crop circles, or more crop circles have been done by people, you know. But
That was one of M. Night
Shyamalan.
Shyamalan's better movies.
Yeah, I like that one actually.
Didn't have a whole lot of good movies.
No, it just went downhill from there. But yeah, that one was actually really good. I mean, there's a lot of good alien type movies, but I think it just feeds into the craziness, I guess.
Yeah, as a fictional story or subject, it's really cool and interesting, right? But then
Yeah.
not once we try how it is applied into a real world understanding and sense, it gets really ridiculous,
Yeah.
right? Like, beliefs of alien abductions and stuff. First, I guess, reported incident was Betty and Barney Hill, a couple from, I think, New Hampshire. The story is that they were driving down a highway there in New Hampshire, and they saw some lights. They saw an object. It came down to them. Barney got out his pistol because he was scared. It was in the trunk of his car. Anyway, whole story is they got abducted, and they basically can't remember anything about it. They were abducted for a night, I guess,
Hmm.
and all they remember is that they were acting weird afterwards. Anyway, and there's a whole story. This is the first one. There's plenty of abduction stories after this, obviously, but you see the stories being one-upped, one after the other.
Yeah.
The first stance is that these are objects in the air that we don't know what they are. Next thing is these are alien aircraft that we're seeing. Or we're seeing alien heads popping out of these aircraft, or whatever the hell you had
Google
before.
Earth.
And then after that, you have people. This was in 1961. This Betty and Barney Hill being abducted. So this is like a decade after.
Yeah.
All these sightings. Then you have this. I was abducted by aliens. They took me into their spacecraft and they
It gets even better.
like probed me and stared at my genitals and stuff like that, or whatever aliens do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the abductions are just kind of an
Well-
interesting add-on to these these stories.
Yeah. I think it's funny that you mentioned that, to examine them or whatever, because just online, a little bit of information about it is like an abduction typically is something to do with a forced medical examination for their reproductive system. And then it's like a lot of a lot of these cases, they claim their encounters were described as terrifying, but a lot of them have been viewed as pleasurable and
Oh, no.
transformative.
Oh no.
So, yeah, so kind of interesting little tidbit, it's, I don't know, active imagination or just, I don't know. But there's actually a psychiatrist, I think actually at Harvard University, that spent a lot of time investigating cases of abduction. And the good thing about that is he went into a lot of the kind of the mental illness aspects, and there was all kinds of stuff that he came up with that people maybe had disorders or whatever, but he basically had said there was the most compelling cases were like several cases of post-traumatic stress disorder. I mean, but I wonder if that has something to do with people who obviously are believing they were abducted and like full-heartedly think that's what happened, and I guess that's what could result in, I don't know.
Yeah, you could create that own stress.
Right, and
your-
just and stress about it. So just kind of interesting that he spent so much time looking at it.
Cool. We're coming to basically all we have left on this. I mean, I think it's an extremely intriguing topic, but I think a lot of people don't know that, because since the 40s and 50s, UFOs have been kind of a big deal, even whether they're alien nature or not. They could be dangerous to national security issues for whatever government, right? So there's been dozens and dozens and dozens of government-sanctioned investigations and studies conducted on UFO sightings. And, I mean, you're talking about some of the really big studies and famous studies that were done by Sweden, done by the United States of America, both the Army and the Air Force, Brazil, France, Uruguay. I mean, you have all these. It's not just the United States, right? It's all these other different countries conducting these investigations to find out if it's something worth studying, if it's something worth being concerned about, if it's real, things like that. And I just think it's interesting that there's been no official government investigation that has ever publicly concluded that UFOs are indisputably real, that they're even physical objects, that they're even extraterrestrial in origin, or that any of this is actually any concern to national defense. And and these these negative conclusions to UFOs have also been found in studies that were highly classified for years and years and years, but have since then been unclassified. So I mean, on a grand scale, these UFO things are something that are people who are in control just don't care about. It's not something to really be bothered about.
Yeah. Well, I think after all these years, where nothing's come to for however long we started, whatever in the 40s, then shouldn't be too much of a concern.
Right.
There's nothing to go off of.
There's no War of the Worlds yet, so.
Yeah. So,
but then they started
so Tom
here.
Cruise isn't needed yet.
Yeah. So that's where my opinion kind of stands, is with those investigations and studies, those official ones.
Yeah. I think, as far as aliens or UFOs or whatever we want to call them, coming here, I don't believe any of that. I think it's kind of, I'm on the same page as you with that. As far as stuff being out maybe in the universe, maybe it's it's a big place, so it could be life somewhere. But I think if something was out there, they would be as curious as we are.
Oh yeah, I'm with you. I think that statistically, life is definitely out there in the universe
Somewhere.
I don't know if that means intelligent life. But obviously life is out there.
Yeah.
We're talking about so many billions of planets, even millions and billions of solar systems that could sustain life.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous. It boggles the mind.
Yeah.
And so obviously there's life out there. Intelligent life? I don't know. If possible again. Has it come here? No way. Come on, let's get real.
Yeah, it would have to be life coming here. It would have to be intelligent life. It would have to be somewhat similar to us, I guess. And I don't see it. And obviously there's just no proof, to me anyway.
No evidence that you deem worthy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right, well, do you want to talk about the time that you were abducted?
No. I want to keep that private.
It's too close to home.
A little too close to home.
A little too close to your privates.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's all we got tonight, but we have a lot of fun in store for the next couple of episodes really fast. Within the next few recordings, we are going to have some guests, our first guests.
Yeah, so stay tuned.
Yep, so we're going to rustle it up a little bit and
rally the troops.
Get crazy, and we'll get a third voice, fourth voice every once in a while in here. We know how interesting we can be, and that's about for 9 episodes. Anyway.
So hint to when the next one is going to have a guest.
Anyway, thanks for listening, guys. Have a good night.